And now I invite the parents and adults. I hope you laughed with the kids because we're going to change topics slightly because we're going to talk about suffering. You see, Jesus said in this passage today, take up my cross and follow me, or take up your cross and follow me. And we struggle, I think, as adults in this world today to know what it means to take up our cross. And at this time in Lent, especially at this time in COVID and post-snowpocalypse and all that, I'd like to talk about how God understands suffering. And a lot of what I'm talking about today comes directly from Henry Nouwen's book, Following Jesus, Finding Our Way Home in an Age of Anxiety. And the pastor's book study on Wednesday at 1, blatant plug, please join us. It's on Zoom. We've been reading this book, and it has meant a lot to me. And we're about to finish reading it, but you can come and join us. Please do that. We all need to start from a place about God when we think about suffering. First of all, God is not way out there. God is right here. Sometimes when we're suffering things, when things aren't going right, we can get to the place where we say, well, God is so far away, I can't connect with God because God can't understand. But that's not true. God understands, and God is right here. In fact, God suffers with us. And Nouwen says, there is no suffering, whether it is loneliness, anger, pain, or rejection, that has not been suffered by God. There is no suffering that has not been suffered by God. How's that possible? Well, we believe in a God who became fully human. Not fully human as physically, and then God internally so I could deal with everything that was going on. No, we know Jesus suffered. Fully human, Jesus suffered. So God suffered. As believers in God, believers in Jesus, we're not going to get away from suffering. This is not a magic bullet that makes our lives better. The reality is, being human means things go wrong. I mean, we can think we're prepared for a snowpocalypse, and it still happens. That's the reality of living fully in the world. Things happen. Things go wrong. And if nothing else, COVID has taught us that. How many families, how many people have done everything right, wearing their mask, staying distance, but needing to work, needing to get groceries, needing to take care of themselves. COVID has come into the homes, and people have been lost. In fact, today, this afternoon, through the city of Austin, we're live streaming a memorial service for all those who have been lost, the 500,000 people here in the United States. That's the suffering we're talking about today. My husband likes to say, we don't get out of life alive. And he reminds me of that regularly. And it's true. We don't get out of life alive. We can't avoid suffering. The other side of that is we have to deal with compassion fatigue. We who aren't suffering at the moment can become exhausted by the suffering that is around us. And Nouwen says, confrontation with human suffering does not lead to compassion. It leads to anger, numbness, irritation, and rejection because we don't know how to deal with it all. It is too much. It is a heavy burden, more than we can carry. So if you are feeling compassion fatigue, exhaustion at the burden you are carrying, please don't beat up on yourself. This is part of the suffering, the exhaustion from being aware of all of the injustices that are in our world. That is your cross. Now, it also says the church is supposed to be so full of love, but sometimes in a church there are people who hate each other. In your circle and community, there is jealousy and anger, and it seems to be unbearable. Just where you expect love, there is conflict and pain. Now, Jesus says, take up your cross. He doesn't say, make up your cross, create your cross, go after your cross. He just says, take up your cross. And now one says, taking up your cross is to have the courage to see your pain. To see your pain. Sometimes that is the hardest thing to do. Seeing your pain means letting it be real. Now, as we have talked about the labyrinth, I see that seeing your pain is walking into the labyrinth. Letting your pain be okay. Letting your feelings be exactly what they are. Not making them better, not excusing them, not judging them. But to say, I'm hurting right now. I can't watch another news story about people who are dying. I can't watch another news story. I just can't. That's okay. Acknowledging your pain is letting God in to your pain. It's inviting God to come alongside you instead of having God so far away that God doesn't know what you're going through. It's a big step. It's huge to say, man, I'm hurting. Especially independent, self-contained people. Acknowledging pain is one of the hardest things. I promise you that God can handle your pain, no matter how big it is. God can be with you in your pain. So walk into the labyrinth, letting your pain be real. As you wander that path, accept your pain. It's okay. Tears, laughter, anger, whatever your pain brings, let it be okay. And as you walk to the center of the labyrinth, there's a space, there's a special thing that happens. Henry Nouwen, in his book, tells the story of going to the Grand Canyon when he was depressed. He was struggling with depression, and he did this visit, and he looked over the Grand Canyon, and he said, "My dear, why all these problems? looking at the Grand Canyon, at that enormous abyss of beauty, the strange depression fell away. I felt the silence. In the face of this natural wonder, I thought, what are you worrying about? As if you are carrying the burdens of the world, a world that survived before you and is something that will go a long time after you. Why don't you just enjoy your life and really live it? The center of the labyrinth is that place where we can say, God is my companion. I can share this burden with God so that I can live with what's going on. I'm not alone. And with that moment, we can turn around and we start walking out of the labyrinth, following the same path that we came in, with every right being a left and every left being a right. Walking out is letting God's joy enter into you. Like Sarah's experience of being barren, in a time and a place when a woman's role was her bearing of children, having no child was shame, was humiliation, was failure. And when she let God's joy in, and the realization that she had a child, and they named him Isaac, laughter. That's the joy we're talking about. Nouwen says, joy is that ongoing movement out of the places of death, out of the places where things remain the same and are not moving. Joy is embracing sorrow and happiness, pain and pleasure. It is deeper, fuller, it is more. It is something that remains with us. The joy of God can be with us always. In moments of sickness, in moments of health, in moments of success, in moments of failure, in moments of birth, in moments of death. The joy of God is never going to leave us. Today, we commission two of our new Stephen leaders. And as we reflect on sorrow and pain, and God standing right here beside us, sometimes it's too hard to remember when God is incorporeal. So we need God in the presence of another human being. And those are our Stephen ministers here at this church. Stephen ministers are available to you, to companion you through the sorrow, so that you can find joy even while all that stuff is going on. Asking for help is not failure, it is success. It is taking up your cross, as Jesus said, and following Jesus. Jesus does not ask us to suffer alone. There is no credit in heaven for the amount of suffering that we do. Instead, Jesus calls us to claim our human existence fully. Good, bad, and ugly, and beautiful. To let others help us connect with God when we need it. In the breaking of the bread in our communion today, we come together to remember Christ's suffering, that has led to the joy of resurrection and healing. That is what Jesus is talking about. That is what Abraham and Sarah covenanted with God, that God will always be with us. God will always be calling us into joy and sharing our suffering with us. May God's peace and love be with you, whatever is going on in your life, today, tomorrow, and always. Amen.